And just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded. And if any members of the public would like to leave public comment, please do so by signing up under the chat feature that you'd like to give public comment. Thank you,
Good morning, everyone. Oh, my hair looks like a mess. Okay, so let's get started. My apologies for being late. You know, I'm never late. Although it is my heritage to be late. It's in my blood.
So Evelyn, I was on time, which is really.
So we switched. That's all we did. We
Exactly.
switched. We switched. I was when I lived in England, I was embarrassed by the pastor, you know, as I was walking in, and you know, and I was like, that doesn't bother me. You know, it's what I do. So welcome, everyone. So we have a series of small contracts to approve and a couple of recommendations to go to the board and an audit update. So with that, let's get started with our statement. The trustees of the Boston Public Library reaffirm our commitment to racial equity and to principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion more broadly. The library is formally committed to becoming an anti-racist organization in response to the systemic racism, inequity, and injustice prevalent in our society. We acknowledge also that the Boston Public Library Central Library stands on land that was once a water-based ecosystem providing sustenance for the indigenous Massachusetts people and is a place which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange among nations. We are committed to land acknowledgements for all locations at which we operate. We reaffirm this commitment to set the context of our planning, deliberations, and public engagement will take place from a spirit of welcome and respect found in our motto, free to all. Can I get a roll call, Pamela?
Yes, you may. I'm just noting that we have two trustees that will be absent today. Navjeet Bal and Jeff Hawkins are unable to attend today. I'll say your last name. Arana Ortiz.
Present.
Marinas.
Here.
Tyler.
Here.
Leonard.
Here.
And Rush.
Good morning.
Thank you.
We got quorum. All right, let's get started. Approval of the minutes for January 11th. Can I please get a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Second.
All right, can I get, we need a roll call, Ms. Pamela?
Yes, I'm sorry. Arana
That's all
Ortiz.
right. Yes.
Marinas.
Yes.
Tyler.
Yes.
Leonard.
Yes.
And Rush.
Yes.
So moved.
All right, contracts. Emily, let's get started with Senior Little.
Great. And if we could, Evelyn, since Emily's going to help us on both A and D, if we could, maybe we can talk about those sequentially.
That should be fine.
The first contract is for Cine Little, which is a food service company that help people establish new restaurants or go out to bid on contracts. We have used them before. We used them, I think it was 2007 when we did the second bid for the McKim restaurant and catering services. And we used them most recently in 2016. I believe they actually are on the call as guests this morning watching. So if we have specific questions, we can always talk to them. But we are asking to use them again for the most recent bid the new bid that we're going to do for the catering contract.
Yeah, Ellen, I do have one quick not so much about the contract, just one, I'd love to ask them, you know, challenges they're facing in the food service business and kind of does that come into play as you go out for bids? I'd love to ask Cindy Little that and what they're seeing now compared to a few years ago when they did this last and what they'll be looking for going forward, if anything's changed.
Jay,
Sure.
could you open their
There
mic
is
for me?
Chuck Schuyler in attendees if we want to.
Open his mic for me, Jay. Mr. Schuler, are you available?
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Chip. Yeah.
All right.
So I'm sorry, could you repeat the question one more time?
Sure. It was basically how things have changed from a few years ago when the last time we went through this process to today. I know food service has had some great challenges because of COVID, and now we're getting into a challenging economy. And I'm just trying to find out what would be different this time around. Is there anything that you guys are looking at differently than you may have looked at 3 or 4 or 5 years ago? That's kind of basically the question, kind of an update on what you're seeing in your industry as you go out for bids.
Sure. The overall process really hasn't changed that much. Fundamentally, your business being, the lion's share of it is catering. You don't have the opportunity to, incorporate technology like you do at your cafes or traditional food service concepts. From a outside caterer standpoint, provided that the bidders or food service providers have commissaries that are close by, the biggest thing for them is staffing these days. So trying to figure out ways to expedite food service to your location is probably the biggest challenge.
I have a question. I mean, I know with COVID, a lot of catering businesses closed. Do you see that as well? So, therefore meaning we'll have less competition in the market?
I would have to do some research in the Boston area of the larger catering companies. I mean, most of them have the national vendors. They're starting to get a little more creative and think outside of traditional food service contracts where you have kitchens on site, and they're establishing commissaries within the major markets like the Boston area. So you've really picked up, since probably 2015, you picked up a completely different pool of opportunity with the larger vendors, plus your larger catering companies within the Boston area. They've maintained their business. Yeah, they've been hurt the last couple of years like everybody else, but you still probably have the same pool that you did in 2015, if not larger.
We are aware that the two bidders for the last contract will bid. One obviously is the incumbent, and we have a belief that there is at least a third large caterer that is interested in it.
And actually, that's going to bring me to the next question, which is, because when you say national vendors, then I sort of open eyes and get, flags going on. How do we ensure, throughout the process, equity and participation, and reach out to various vendors, not only in the area, but also that we're equitable in the process?
Sure. So before we even get started, Ellen, Emily, and we would go through a list of potential bidders that we would want to invite to the RFP process. Obviously, you're going to have your two local bidders that's bid before, or your incumbent now, and possibly another local vendor that's surfaced over the last few years. And I do know of two national vendors that do have commissaries in the Boston area that could potentially be interested in bidding as well. So you'll get a variety of both if you do select to go to or invite national bidders.
And I do think, Evelyn, one of the reasons we wanted to use Cindy Little again was to help us with the equity and inclusion piece. We have some ideas of how a contractor could increase participation in that. We've thought about partnering with local restaurants or having apprenticeship programs for smaller caterers, that sort of thing. I don't want to say that we have a complete idea of what the universe of these things could be, but we do want to make sure that that we judge people on their efforts and their commitment to inclusion and equity.
Yeah, the plan is to review the total criteria necessary to pick to have the best RFP out there, and then the best selection criteria. So step one is really establishing those, and that's the opportunity to introduce criteria that matter to us as the library, whether it's local presence or specific language or thoughts around ensuring equitable employment across the bidding vendors. So these are very important conversations, but it is worth that this is not simply about the ultimate dollar revenue. This is about having the best value and the best quality partner in an entity that can deliver these services for us.
Any more questions? And then what's the timeline?
So we'd like to engage them as soon as possible and get this underway. Vote D is to extend the TCA contract again. So if you'd like, we can have that conversation now, and Emily can give us more detail on why we are asking for an additional extension.
That was the door that I was opening. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. So the current McKim contract that the catered fair holds was originally planned to conclude in May of 2021. In mid-2020, we had reached out to the board asking for an extension. Obviously, we were right in the beginning of the pandemic. The library was closed, and there was no event function. The restaurant operations, the drop-off catering, everything that they do had come to a halt. The original extension that we had requested was for 18 months, which brings us to October of this year, 2022. And at the time, obviously, in September 2020, when we first asked, there was a lot of uncertainty. We didn't know where we were with the pandemic, and it certainly went on and has continued to go on much longer than we anticipated. The library itself was closed to events for about 16 months. So that 18-month extension is really just kind of giving us a buffer there. And since we reopened for events in July, there's been a number of other variables, the mask mandates, the vaccine mandates, Omicron and the different variants, just things that have directly impacted the events that we're hosting at the library and everything else, the restaurant service, the drop-off catering that really isn't happening right now. And we also want to make sure we're able to build and receive the most competitive bids we can for this contract. So what we'd like to do is ask for an additional 12 months, which would bring us to October 31st of 2023, with the understanding that the bid process happens this year, and come this fall, we'll know who the new contract holder will be.
And then if we do have a new contractor, they would start booking appointments for any new event. So we would have fewer crossover events. If you've already, if TCA loses the bid and they already have people under contract, they would come back into the building to execute those things. So a longer runway would limit the number of crossovers we would have. And it would allow the new vendor to get up and running over a longer period of time.
Yeah, I think this is both a more responsible approach to take account of the COVID impacts and other variables, as well as ensuring a material and substantive evaluation of potential bidders, as well as managing the potential for a transition later on. So I think this is a very responsible approach.
We basically, so the ask is that we extend for another year, which gives us the opportunity to go through bid, and then also to just give them runway to just complete and have a seamless transition, correct?
Correct. And as part of the bid process, we go and visit events that they are having. We couldn't do that this last year because people weren't really having regular events, excuse me. And we also couldn't bring people in to tour the building in big groups because we were under COVID restrictions.
Another factor as well, we're still dealing with cancellations and postponements. So things are obviously lifting up, but the reality is we're still kicking contracts out. So we want to make sure that we're able to conclude those contracts with the provider that they had originally executed.
No, I'm personally great with the extension. I think that's kind of with what we just went through, and also giving TCA a little bit more normalcy after the last couple of years would be helpful to see how they've done and how they've changed the way they've done business as well. So I'm good with the extension, Evelyn.
Yes, well,
Senator Rush, any comments?
no, I'm good. All good.
So Evelyn, do you want to take a vote and do the two of them together? And I'll just do a roll call based on the fact that anyone just ask
so-
the opposition, and then we'll do it that way.
Right. So I'm just going to put a clarification so it's noted. The approval of the contract of Sidney Little, it's approval to execute
Yes,
based on the scope. And the second one, it's a recommendation of an extension that will go to the full board.
that's correct.
Great.
All right. So can I get Pamela? Do you want to do who opposes?
I'll do you can do a roll call for those two
Just
votes
do the roll
together.
Go.
And then just ask if there's any opposition, but I think if you go
Got
through
it.
a roll call, we'll know, so.
Got it. Roll call.
All righty, this is for both votes. Arano Ortiz,
Yes on both.
Arenas,
yes, on both.
Tyler,
Yes, on both.
Leonard,
Yes on both?
and Rush.
Yes, on both.
Okay, both passed. Thanks, Evelyn.
Thank you, Emily. All right, let's do cityscapes.
So Cityscapes is a contractor we have used for a number of years to do the McKim Courtyard. We've gone out to bid on a number of occasions, and they've been the only bidder. We have also on some occasions just asked the trustees to allow us to use them. As we get ready for what we think is going to be a big spring and summer number of events using the courtyard, we'd like to get it back into working shape. I look out my window now into the courtyard and it's pretty scraggly out there. So we would, in the interest of the events business, would like to use Cityscape because they know it so well to revamp the whole thing, probably get a couple of maintenance trips out of them. And it would be our intent over the late spring, early summer to bid this out and see if we can't get more people to bid on it.
Any
So
questions?
just a quick question. Yeah, so that means that they would do the work now, Ellen, and then we would go out to bid for next year or for continuing maintenance and support of the.
Correct. So we'd like
Okay.
to use the people who know it the best to
Yeah.
do this upgrade for us. We're also taking over the pots out on the front of McKim Plaza, so they will design those for us as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I guess, Evelyn, there's a bigger question I have. This is such a showpiece and such a hidden gem in the city. And it attracts people that might normally not come into the library, but it's such a quiet space in a magnificent library. And I guess, and I know we're always thinking about budgets and expenses. Have we done enough? Has there been a master plan or is it worthy to take a look at? Is there more that we could be doing to make it even more attractive and more of a magnet for people to come through the library and use its services?
John, if you haven't been here at night recently, we did a revamp of the courtyard, and Beth can talk to this. Did some work on the fountain, and there's new lighting down there. It's really, which is one of the reasons that the plantings are kind of a mess because we had construction going on down there, but they really did an amazing job renovating the fountain.
No, that's great. What I'm talking about is like the plantings, everything. Have we done enough, and have we ever really, when was the last time we did a master plan on the courtyard? And is it worth us evaluating that again at a future date just to see what they're going to do? Or are we just going to maintain what we've done in the past? I guess what's the question.
So I think the opportunity with the overall McKim master plan is to truly revisit the courtyard during the design process for that at that time. So I think the renovations to the fountain and repairs to the statue are good. The landscape does the right next thing. I think in terms of the courtyard itself, it would be in the context of the McKim master plan. The other opportunities which are not on deck for discussion today include, interim activation of the McKim Plaza on the outside. That's the opportunity, I think, to provide more of an engaged draw. But equally, and we're planning to do this operationally, invest more of our trustee funds in landscaping across the system, so that the branches too we ensure that their smaller landscape spaces are up to par. So I think there are additional opportunities that we're continuing to discuss and move forward with. But with respect to the beautification of the courtyard itself, the contract in front of you is the one that will really make the difference.
Okay, so David, following up on that, I think, and Evelyn, it might be worthwhile eventually to go through that, because I think that's a wonderful idea on the branches. It's, it sounds like this will be part of the master plan. This is to get through until we get the master plan on the McKim building. And then in addition to that, you've given thought to and developing a plan of what we do with the branches and the beautification opportunities we might have there. I think that would be a worthwhile discussion for us to sometime have in the future when you're ready, David, for you and the staff to walk through what you're thinking with some of the branches. And
no, it sounds good. I mean, today I would call out that the branches, that's a combined effort between custodial staff where appropriate, some of the friends groups that are really engaged with maintaining the outside spaces, as well as paid contractors. So yes, but not today, but absolutely we'll get back to you on that.
thank you.
If I could just add very briefly, last summer and again this summer, we did create 9 or 8 outdoor sites at branches to take advantage of the expanded Wi-Fi that we also put in. They've been incredibly heavily used. We're working with the city's Office of New Urban Mechanics. We're using Mayor Janey's Joy Agenda funding to revamp all of these pilot sites and make them permanent all year round. And we'll be adding a 9th site. So those are all really quite impressive and are getting a whole lot of use for outdoor activity at the branches. So that's really exciting too.
That's great to hear, Michael. Good.
Right. So any more questions regarding cityscapes? No? All right. Pamela?
I'm just going to read your last name. Arano Ortiz,
Yes.
Arenas,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
and Rush.
Yes.
Moved. Thank you.
Right. Arrow Street, Miss Beth.
Good morning, everyone.
morning.
Sorry if I sound a little bit echoey, but I'm actually up in the new rare book space because we are in the process of getting ready to return collections and reopen to the public in the coming months. And what I'm talking to you today is a portion of that. So we have, as part of the newly renovated space, a lovely public lobby with a series of museum quality display cases that will house a rotation of items from across our special collections. This is a public space. It is for anyone visiting the library to enjoy, not just those who would be using the reading room. And we're really looking to both create a concept for that space, but also improve the larger wayfinding and signage experience around sort of this reintroduction of special collections. We believe that it's important for our messaging to be cohesive with the rest of the library. And so we're asking to contract with Arrow Street, which is the design firm responsible for the graphics, signage and wayfinding for the Boylston Street renovation a couple of years ago. We would like to contract with them to design a series, not a single installation, but a series of installation that would run over the course of a year, year and a half, that complements the library's visual identity. And we're looking for services to support multiple rotations of displays, and potentially the associated fabrication, printing, and install costs, we would be spending special collections trust funds for this work. And we are asking for up to $45,000 for Arrow Street.
Question?
Beth, this is somehow just to make sure I understand the design of exhibition design is that there's going to be a theme around those exhibitions, and if there's a theme, could you give us an idea of what the theme might be?
Absolutely. So we are really looking to reintroduce special collections after having been closed for so many years. We get a lot of questions about what are special collections? Who are you? What do you have? Why is this exciting? And we are really looking to provide that lens into sort of this scope of what we have. So it would be not only things from the Rare Books and Manuscripts Department, but things from across our special collections holdings. We get questions like, how do these objects come to you? Do you buy them? Are they gifts? So we would be telling little stories with that for an opportunity sort of for people to understand, you know, how did things get to the library? What do you do when you bring them into the collection? What are some, how do you take care of them? So for instance, we could showcase things that are recently conserved. How are collections used in a modern world? One of the first items we're talking about in our rotation, for example, is the Bible that Mayor Wu was sworn in on, and sort of offering, again, this isn't an enormous gallery in the sense that many of our other exhibition galleries are, but this really will allow us to have a rotation of several dozen items that will allow people to kind of get a taste. Here's one object, for instance, from a whole collection that's been newly digitized. You know, scan this QR code to learn more about the whole collection. We're really looking at it as an entry point, and also something that frankly is kind of a light lift for us to switch out in this first year plus of reopening to public service, recognizing that so much of our staff time and energy is going to be around opening that new public service model.
Thank you. Sounds great. Thanks so much.
I would add that we are looking to, you know, ensure that all of our work, all of our public facing work around special collections over the next period really takes relevance and engagement as its starting points. I mean, sometimes an obscure piece can be cool and interesting, but we have a particular obligation as a public library to center how the community could be interested in a particular object or holding and tell that story. So I'll certainly be looking to ensure that's infused in the work that Arrow Street will do with Beth and the team.
No, I think Kat's an amazing to finally have this starting to come to fruition. Congratulations, Beth, to you and the team and the whole library. This is exciting. We've talked about it for so long. It's fantastic to see it finally coming into existence. Congrats.
Thanks. The whole team is really excited. This is a big time for us.
I mean, I have to say, Beth, that for me, what's most exciting is just basically opening up the collection to everyone, because I've been a trustee for a long time, and I've always had this perception that is this dark room in the back, that it's not accessible and it's only for those who are special to access. And the fact that, you're telling the story and opening the access it's great. It's really great. I thank you.
And on top of that, I mean, I don't know how much of you guys do some research online, but when you do, so many of the archives of newspapers and everything are being locked up, and subscription fees and all of that. So the idea that we could have some really unique things available free for research or for people, I think is terrific. It's gotten more and more expensive to go online to try to track and do research on things. And I think this is also an opportunity, Beth, maybe you want to allude to, that's a great opportunity for the collection to be out there in the forefront on digital.
Absolutely. And we really have thought about how do we use this opportunity with physical public service to really continue to push out even more that this is scratching the surface of what people can access, and it expands beyond open hours, and it expands beyond physical access to a much broader constituency.
Any more questions? All right, if we don't have any more questions, can I get a roll call, please?
Sure can. Arano Ortiz,
Yes.
Arenas,
Yes.
Tyler,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
and Rush. Either way, motion passed.
All right. All right, next item. Can we get Keith on the line so we can talk about wireless?
Yes, good morning.
Hello, Keith.
This is a request for renewal of the software and maintenance services for the Cisco Meraki wireless access point controller software and firewall controller software. It is a 3-year renewal for software and maintenance support services that was put out for bid under the E-rate program. We have 3 bid responses. E+, the recommended vendor, was the lowest bidder, and one that we've dealt with in the past for other services and products.
Question for Keith. Keith,
No, I think this is
go
fairly
ahead.
straightforward. It's the same products that we've been using, and with a vendor that we've used before. So I have no concerns as a former chief technology officer.
Is there, quick question, Keith. Is there part of the scope, is it just to maintain what we have, or is it to also expand?
There are no expansion of services, and in fact, the contract is not with E+. They are the reseller of the product. So the contract is with Cisco Meraki to provide continuing software updates to our existing hardware, the wireless access points and firewalls that are covered under this for the Boston Public Library and our MBLN partners. And there are no additional services other than any support that we would get directly from Cisco Meraki opening a support case with it. But there's no additional services beyond. It's simply renewal of existing support contracts that we already have in place and that are due to expire. The term is from July 1st to September 30th, 2023. Actually, that end date has got to be wrong. It's a 3-year renewal. So it's from July 1st, 2022, 3 years beyond that, 2025, sorry.
Got it. Okay. Any more questions? Can I please get a roll call for approval?
Yes. Arano Ortiz,
Yes.
Arenas,
Yes.
Isla,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
and Rush.
Yes.
Thank you. So moved. And just a reminder to the public, if you would like to sign up for public comment, please do so by signing up in the chat now. The chat will be closed shortly.
Right. Michael, you're up next.
Oh, isn't that Emily next? Or is that, oh no, that's the extension.
we
They already took
covered
care of
that.
Yes, you did. Great, thank you. Great. Good morning, trustees. So we have the great opportunity to do some improvements with the Kirstein Business Library and Innovation Center space. This is something that the staff down there have really been looking to do. It's to enclose the alcoves in that space with glass entryways. It will really expand the way that space can be used. People are using those alcoves already, and it's a little bit challenging because they are open to the larger space. So if people have conversations or do Zoom meetings or have little interviews, they're not really semi-private. So we explored the possibility of doing this by working with a company to get a quote for how that would work in that space, and the cost can be covered with Kirstein, Friends of Kirstein trust funds. So we're hoping to enclose all of the alcoves in the Kirstein space with the same glass and framing setup that we've used elsewhere in the Boylston Street building, to provide uniformity of design and uniformity of service. So we're hoping to get that started.
How many, I'm trying to kind of picture it. How many alcoves are you looking to enclose? Is
So
it the corners?
I believe there's 11. There's quite, the entire one wall has alcoves, and then across the side that's facing the lobby of RAB, there's 2 more. And then there's actually one alcove that's in the Mass Edco space that they had requested. It's an office space for them that they had requested to put glassing in as well. They had offered to pay for that, but we're just going to do all of them at one because it is our space. Ultimately, they're just a tenant. So I believe it's 11.
And when you say similar to the Johnson, is like movable glass?
No, it's a glass wall, but it has an actual door that can be locked. And it's the same as the entryway to the InnoLab and the Exchange, which are spaces down in Kirstein that already have the glass walls and the glass doors.
Got it. Okay. Any more questions? And this is the recommendation for the full board.
For the
It's a
bid.
recommendation to delegate back to
To
the
delegate approval. Yep. So we're asking the board to let us approve a contract that goes through the bid.
and that will be expected to be over $100,000.
Yep.
And then what's the timeline that you expect this to come to us?
We'd really like to put the RFP out soon. So once we get this approval, we'll initiate that. So I would imagine it would be sometime in the spring, early summer.
Any more questions? All right, Pamela, roll call. Pamela.
Sorry, I thought I was on, I didn't know I was still muted. Arana Ortiz,
Yes.
Arenas,
Yes.
Heiler,
Yes.
Leonard,
Yes.
and Rush.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Lots of great activity. Thank you all. All right. And then let's talk about the budget.
Freddie's favorite.
If I could just make note for you, Evelyn, that I know that trustees Amawa Arenas has to jump off the call, and I just need to note it for the record.
Got it.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
you,
I will
Zamawa.
jump off right now. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Take care, Zuma.
Thank you, Samal.
Okay, so as we do every year, we'll review the maintenance budget. And then David has asked for a deeper dive on the external funds because we don't tend to talk about that too much. Just as a reminder, the city budget process has 5 steps to it. The first and sort of the heart of the submission is the maintenance budget. What will it cost next year to do pretty much what you did this year? And then there are requests for memos. What would you suggest if we came to a point where we had to have reductions? What reforms might you offer, which we always have a number of those? What revenue can an agency bring in? We obviously have been going in the opposite direction from that. We waived initially youth fines and more recently all fines. And we're not really a revenue generating agency. And then the final is the initiatives. All of those last 4 are really policy documents, but David typically talks about them in sort of an overarching way without going into the specifics. So I'll leave that to him right now, and we'll go through maintenance. The number you see here, oftentimes, depending upon when this meeting is held and depending upon when we meet with City Office of Budget Management, OBM, oftentimes we show you what our submission was with the caution that we have to vet our assumptions through OBM before we come to a final number. This number actually is an agreed upon maintenance number between us and OBM. So this is the maintenance budget that we anticipate the mayor will file with City Council next month. If you look at the permanent employees line, it's a relatively small increase, and the majority of that is because we are out of contract. So typically when we are in contract, when we are in a 3-year period where the two unions, PSA and AFSCME, are going to get normally scheduled COLAs, this will be a higher amount. But their last scheduled COLA was in January of 2020. At some point, we will settle those contracts and there'll be some retroactivity. But for now, we do believe that this $80,000 increase is enough to get us the regular steps, longevity increases. And we also had a number of double counted positions that we were able to move out. I think the value was about $500,000. That happens primarily when we put forth a reorganization where we are holding positions to create new positions. Sometimes it takes a couple of years for that to shake out. And when it's done, we have some positions we need to eliminate. We also had some issues a couple of years ago when we created a new position. Oftentimes a second one was created and we've gone through and trued those up. So we think this is, and I also should say that we have a fairly significant payroll surplus right now, owing primarily to the fact that we didn't do much hiring during the pandemic and started again last summer. So we're still playing some catch up there. So we do believe our business manager, Jane Sproul, and I and her staff do believe that that's a reasonable maintenance number. Moving on to overtime. That number has stayed pretty steady over the last number of years. We do typically spend, well, pre-pandemic, we did typically spend more than the 325. Oftentimes it's for Sunday overtime for PSA here at Central. Of course, we're not open on Sundays right now. And the other main bucket for that is custodian shortfalls. So if we don't have enough custodians, we will backfill that on overtime. We've had some success in increasing the numbers of custodians we have, particularly in the branches. And right now we are, I think, at about $140,000 through January 5th for overtime this year. So that's looking like a pretty good number. Just for comparison's sakes, prior to the COVID, we would probably have 550 running for the last few years. And I think last year we were down to about 150,000. So certainly COVID related. The other salary costs are unemployment, workers' comp, T-passes. That's a pretty consistent number. I don't think we have anybody on unemployment right now. We are wrapping up a workers' comp claim case. So I think that will be a reasonable number. And I can pause for any questions on salary and salary related costs before we go forward.
Anybody have questions?
All right. Moving on to utilities and telecom. I think you've heard me say before that number, these are numbers that the city comes up with. They manage utilities across the enterprise centrally. It is a higher number than we initially thought in when we were doing maintenance. Last year we were at 2.8. Of course, we were substantially closed for the balance of the year, and we had Rosendale and Adams Street completely closed for a period of time. In FY20, we were at 2.6 million, and in FY19, we were at 3.8. I think given the realities that we're seeing right now for utility costs for oil and gas, that number is probably somewhat fluid, but again, that's a number that the city will manage centrally. Moving on to maintenance and repairs. These are some of our big contracts. The MCOR contract, they're the HVAC vendor, so they provide all electrical services, plumbing services in the buildings, both here at Central and in the branches. That's about $2 million. We also have elevator contracts, fire alarm contracts, and some amount of blast repairs. Glass repairs can go up and down. Often years we don't spend it at all, and some years we have a bad year. But that is a small increase to some contracts. This number will go up at some point in the next few months. We're out to bid now, or about to be out to bid on the HVAC contract. We will notify OBM what that number is, and they typically adjust the mayor's final filing in June to accommodate the increase that we'll have there. Repairs for service and equipment, relatively small amount of money. Sometimes the snow equipment, the gates that you come through that break all the time that tell us if somebody's forgot to check out their book, fire extinguisher, and that sort of thing. We actually pay a fair amount of maintenance on the trustee side. So across the 26 odd buildings, that's not a particularly large number. Contracted services, a little bit of a decrease there, and that is primarily because we had $250,000 in joy money this year. It is not baked into the maintenance. And they also gave us $30,000 this year for reopening costs. We usually absorb that on the trustee side. We have a couple of big earmarks in this where the city has asked us to do the contracting to give money to other organizations. $315,000 goes to EDIC for Read Boston, and another $100,000 goes to EDIC for Boston Saves, which is a program Mayor Walsh started, where every child who is a resident of the city of Boston born in any given year has a bank account started for them. There's also the big security contract. It used to be G4S, is now Securitas. That's about 1.6. So I can pause for any questions on the contracts. All right, hearing none.
Ellen,
Yes,
Ellen,
yes.
can you talk to me a little bit more about that earmark of Read Boston and Boston Saves?
Sure. As I say, it's just they need a place for somebody to write the contract and cut the check, do the purchase order, that sort of thing. We don't have a lot of insight into it. We have, and Michael might be able to weigh in on this. There have been a couple of times over the years during the reduction conversations, we've suggested they look at this. They used to be $315 for Read Boston, $115 for Write Boston. We did have a conversation with them. I think it's probably 2016 or so now. They removed the Write Boston one, but the Read Boston remains. And Michael, if you wouldn't mind just giving a little detail on that, if you recall.
Sure, it's not any work that we do at all. It's just, as Ellen said, it's just money that's passed through to the program. We did several years ago have that conversation to see if it was something we wanted to adopt as part of our services and really update how it was handled. But it would have involved an increase in the budget for us to manage the service. Write Boston did spin off to be an independent agency with its own budget, which is why that earmark went away. But the funding for Read Boston still is passed through.
Got it. All right.
The next line is primarily, but not exclusively, collections, books. So you see a really significant increase there. We proposed this increase as a maintenance increase. We receive about $900,000 now in state aid. State aid is obviously a state program run by MBLC. It is a grant program. Any public library in the Commonwealth can apply for it. In order to qualify, have to meet a few criteria. The two big ones are that you have to be open a certain number of hours every week with the number of branches we have, and typically open here at Central 7 days a week. We never have a problem with that one. They did waive that particular requirement during the pandemic. The second big one is that you have to spend 12% of your budget on collections. We've seen our budget go up significantly in the last number of years. So we're always chasing that number a little bit. The city has been great about giving us more collections money. If I go back, I think it is to 2016 through 2021, we got a $660,000 increase over those years. We are now asking for another $590,000 to get us to that 12%. We can make it that 12% with any type of money. So if we buy, and we do obviously, buy books from the trusts, that counts to the 12%. The last couple of years, we've had significant salary savings or salary surpluses, and the city has allowed us to move money down to that line item to pay for, to get us to the 12%. And obviously, it's not just the 12%. We want to put as many books on the shelves or on people's e-books as we can. So I think we'd probably do that out of salary surplus, even if we were already at the 12%. And happy to take any questions on collections. All right. And then the last two are fairly small line items, or the next one's about $1 million. That's Chinatown rent, software licenses, debt service. The debt service is loaded in by OBM. The computers that they buy for us, they buy on a 3-year lease purchase. So there is some amount of debt associated with that, and they'll load that in later. So I expect that number will change by the time they do their final filing. And the equipment, $47,000. That's up a couple of years ago. It used to be $35,000. James Sproul advocated for some more money, and they did get us up to $47,000. Obviously, a relatively small amount of money given the scale of our operations, but we spend it every year, and it's certainly appreciated. So about a 1.2 maintenance increase for FY23.
Done. Any questions?
And if David, if you want to talk about the other submissions.
Yeah, I'll just mention them. You talked about, I think, the 4 categories, and we generally do a very high level update at this point in the process and wait until we have guidance from City Hall as to which ones are likely to be in the published budget in April before drilling into too much detail. So I think, as you noted, we do the 5% reduction exercise, which we always hope is a hypothetical exercise. We don't have a lot to say on the revenue front, although we continue to look for opportunities where it would make sense to do so. The reforms are non-budgetary affecting changes. That's always an ongoing effort. And then in the initiative section, I will note that for this upcoming fiscal year, we have requested primarily investments in the frontline staff capacity, as well as in our facilities support ability. So if it's okay, I will just leave it at that for today until we have more guidance, at which point I'll be able to talk specifically about those things that we expect to see in the proposed budget in April.
I would add, if I could, that over the last number of years, going back to FY18, we've had $2.9 million of initiatives added to our budget. And that's just first year costs. I didn't annualize out the underlying salaries. It included money to establish 6 positions to establish Chinatown, 6 positions recently to get every branch their own custodian, more money for collections, more money for security. We added capacity to project management and a number of other things. So we've been really quite successful with the initiatives in our budget over the last number of years.
Question: what's the schedule, or I should say timeline, for the budget to go to City Hall?
So it goes, I always forget, I think it's the second Tuesday of April. It's in the city charter, but it goes in early April. It's going to be a little different this year because that initiative that gave the city council a little bit more control over the spending categories passed last fall. So typically what would happen is the mayor would file, the city council would reject, and then they would work together to come up with a number. Some changes would be made, and the mayor would resubmit May or June, and they would approve that budget. Now there is the opportunity for the council to make some changes against individual line items. So we'll see what happens there, but I think substantially the timing will be the same. And of course, we typically have our hearing. We go before the council, city council committee on Ways and Means, typically I think in May.
And as part of that more inclusive process, the mayor's team has held a series of listening sessions already throughout the city to get input directly from residents at this stage in the process, as well as conducting a survey in concert with those listening sessions. So not only will there be, I think, greater participation and authority with City Council, but a vision for the budget process that is even more transparent and open than it has been in the past.
We know if those budget hearings will be virtual or recorded, because in the past couple of years, I've had the opportunity to watch, and David and team, you've done a fantastic job presenting. I would encourage the trustees to join and watch. Do we know?
Even when we were live, Evelyn, they broadcast it on City Council TV, I think they call it, and then it lives there. You can go up and pull the archives if you like.
Okay.
And we can send a link. When we have our council hearing scheduled, we can certainly send the trustees a link.
Oh, that'd be great.
The current hearings have been a mixture of in-person or virtual configurations. And we do know that for the purposes of allowing public meetings when required, that permission has been extended through, I think, June or July of this year by the state. And so the option to have it to continue as virtual is certainly permitted.
It's July 15th, David.
Thank you.
Right, any questions on the budget? No questions on the budget? Going once. Okay. New business, audit. Ellen?
We were gonna do externals, I think, if people have time.
That
Or
again?
we can just do that at full trustees, whatever you prefer.
Jay, can you go up one page? That's it.
That's it. So as I said, David wanted to take a little bit of a deeper dive on the externals, particularly for newer trustees, but we don't tend to go into much detail on it. So I think it's probably helpful even to some of you who've been with us a little bit longer. The externals are different than the maintenance budget. If we have any changes from year to year, you're probably going to see it in the externals. Things come up that we don't know about, that we can't really anticipate. The big year, of course, for that was 2016, when we went into this not thinking we were going to have a presidential search, not thinking that we were going to have mold up in rare books, and certainly not thinking the philosophy was about to fall off the wall in the grand hallway. More recently, I would say, I think we discussed at the last trustee meeting a contract for Beth, about $200,000 for the founding research collection work. That's something that's come up in the last few months. They were working on it, but we didn't have a commitment to funding, so we wouldn't have included that. It'll come up during the year and we will likely spend more than we had anticipated here. It's just sort of the nature of the external funds. And I should say that underpinning these 6 categories are about 500 individual spending programs. So that makes it a little more difficult to get to a precise number when we're trying to estimate a year and a half out. Having said that, we do try to balance overwhelming people with detail and trying to have something that you can look at and sort of understand where these monies come from. Over the last number of years, we've changed how we presented this. 2016, we had James Sproul joined us as a new budget manager and took a look at how we were showing these. Prior to that, we had 4 categories. Donations for $450,000. A reasonable person looking at the word donations would have thought it was the affiliates and the associates. And in fact, it wasn't. It was just individual and corporate donations. Then we had 2 state aid funding sources, Library for the Commonwealth and state aid. And then finally, we had other/trusts. Other/trusts made up 60% of our spending. So that certainly didn't give people any insight at a high level of what we were doing. So at that time, we decided to go with these 6 categories. And I'll walk you through them. I think we'll start with we'll skip affiliates for now and start with interlibrary loan in the next 2, as they are our 3 biggest state categories. Interlibrary loan has held firm at about exactly 100,000 for the last number of years. We have a program where our cardholders can borrow from, I think, almost any municipality in the state, many colleges and universities. This pays about 60,000 of that goes to salary for interlibrary loan staff, and the rest goes to the costs associated with moving things through the building across the Commonwealth and other related costs. So an important program, but not a particularly large line item for us. Library for the Commonwealth. This is a big cost category for us, and it has gone up pretty significantly in the last number of years. I think as recently as 2019, it was about 2.5. So we've gotten a big increase here. This pays for a lot of salaries. The Library for the Commonwealth means that anybody who lives in Massachusetts can have a card from BPL. So we provide services statewide, even though we are a municipality. Hence the term Library for the Commonwealth. Previously, it was called Library of Last Recourse, I think. So this is probably a better title. So it pays for a lot of salaries, and then it pays for collections costs, digitizations, and a number of other things. Again, it has gone up relatively significantly over the last number of years. And the final number there is state aid, which we talked about a little earlier. We have to meet a formula to get that money. This is actually a low number. We are at $900,000 this year. So we should adjust that up. What we struggle with a little bit with the state money is we don't know until June what that number is going to be. When the city is asking for the budget submission, the governor is releasing his budget in January, House Ways and Means in April typically. and the Senate typically in May. By the time we get to conference and the mayor and the governor signs the budget, we're usually into June. So this number is always a little bit up in the air for us, but we certainly think that standing at about $900,000 for state aid would be a reasonable number to put forth. The state aid money we can use for any purpose that we want. We typically consider it to be facilities related. So we might spend it on the fleet. The city doesn't pay for any of the cars or vans that move things across the system. Not really any maintenance costs in there, any cleaning supplies, that sort of thing. So we typically consider it to be underpinning the financial commitment for our facilities departments. And I can pause on the state funding and then go back to the affiliates. I'll pause for questions if we have any. All right, moving on, the affiliates. So the affiliates are the associates, the fund, and citywide friends. Most of the branches do have friends group, but they typically run their own checkbooks. So these are sort of our big affiliate contributions. These numbers have gone up over the years. As recently as 2016, we were under $1 million combined. And now I think this number, particularly with what we just talked about for Beth's grant, I think this number is probably going to be low. So we'll see if we can't bring that up. What do they pay for? They pay for, last year, about half of what we spent was on staffing. And then they pay for, particularly the associates will pay for conservation work. The fund will pay for a lot of lectures, programming costs. We paid for, if anybody has a copy of the fabulous new arts and architecture brochure. Oh, I have seen the drone video outside in Copley or inside in the building. That was all paid by the affiliates, specifically the fund. And this last year they paid for the students that do homework help in the branches. Moving on to trust fund spending, this too, there are 187 individual trusts. So it can be a little difficult to project what we're going to spend. Of those almost 200 trusts, about 100 of them are just to buy books, all different types of books, right? Some of them say only buy special collections books. There's one that says buy books on Irish history. There's another one that says buy books on music, buy books on mathematics, buy rare books on focusing on Mexico and the nations of South America. So there's a lot of little pockets of money that roll up to about a $3 million distribution every year. We've spent a little bit less these last few years because Beth's people haven't been buying a lot of special collections because everything's off site and they've been under renovations. That'll probably change this year. But again, it can be a little hard to project that with any certainty, given that we're projecting a year and a half out. And then moving on to other sources. I think people will think of this mostly as events, and a big part of it is events, but is also pay for print, any royalties we get, any interest when we are parking money in CDs because we don't think we're going to spend it, which prior to the drop in interest rates was a pretty good amount of money we would get. And then MBLN, the Mass Bay Library Network, where we have other libraries on our network and they pay us to be part of that so they don't have to have their own network. So as I said earlier, there's only, what do we do? So about half of the event money we bring in goes to run the special events. We have a 3-person event team. We also pay another person out of that money. And then we have to pay day of costs. So it's the overtime for the custodial staff. It's the overtime for the HVAC people. It's the overtime for the security people. After that, we will spend it on anything that we don't have money in the budget for. Pulled out a few cost categories the last year with only $45,000 in the city budget. We've spent the last couple of years $250,000 on security costs, whether that's cameras, whether it's installing swipes on doors, whether it's replacing the gates in all the libraries. We use this money to pay for library cards. There's not money in the budget for library cards. When we want a new bibliocycle, we're buying electric bibliocycles now. We use that money for this. Typically, we use it for opening day collections. If we're short money for state aid and we don't have enough money in the city budget, we will use it for books. We've set up, we use it for furniture. We forward funding furniture for the next couple of years. Allison Ford and her group are redoing some furniture in East Boston, going to move on to a couple more branches after that. Plowing, we don't have any money in the city for plowing. So in a snowstorm, the trustee sides pays for that, pays for the landscaping. So just a host of different things. The event revenue has gone up significantly over the last number of years. Which, all credit to our catering partner TCA and especially to our amazing event staff, Emily Tokarczyk, who was with us earlier, Jill Minikas and Kim Crozier. Prior to the early 2012 to 2016, part of the time we were closed, we were at about 1.2 million. 2019, the last full year prior to the pandemic, we were at 2.1. We closed for the fourth quarter of FY 20 during the pandemic. But prior to that, we were at $1.4 million. So we certainly expected a banner year in FY 20. In FY 21, we were at 44,000. So we are recovering through January. We are at about 900,000. So we do expect the event money to come back. We did have reserves for the last couple of years that helped us tide over through the more difficult times. And we were able to move some costs to the city budget, specifically because we did have such salary surpluses. And I think with that, I know that was a lot of information, probably a little too quickly, but happy to answer any questions.
No, this was good. This is a good reminder of what's what, but these are good categories, Ellen. Thank you. Good reminder. Any questions for Ellen regarding external sources? Okay, now the audit.
So the audit, we have released the bid for the audit. The final amount, it should be under $100,000. So we will go directly to you folks for approval. We will do the initial vetting of the contracts and responses, and then we will ask to have a meeting with finance and audit for you folks to interview the candidates as we did the last time. We're hoping to have at least 3 finalists. And that should be in the month of April, potentially early May, but I think we should be able to get it done in April.
Those are always fun. So get ready with your audit questions.
And Jane is confirming for me that we expect it.
Excellent.
And also this would be a special meeting that would be called that's not scheduled currently, just so everyone's aware of that.
Any questions regarding the audit bit? Okay. Public comment. Do we have anybody signed up for public comment?
We do not.
We do not. All right.
Hey, Evelyn, the one thing we may want to do, if you could have New England NEPC maybe do an update on just kind of the markets for finance and on the investment side of it, since we're talking about audit, it just might be worthwhile just get an update on the portfolio, how we're allocating, what their views are. It might be a good thing for people to read.
Yeah, actually, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. There was a long email that Sebastian sent last week.
Yeah.
That's yeah. It's a roller coaster.
Yes, it is. Yeah, no, there's not much we can do, but it would just maybe, we might get asked at the board, or you might get asked coming up. So it might be worthwhile just to, if they want to do a quick summary for us and our portfolio, that might be something that might be worthwhile to have.
So actually, that's a good point, because we do have the bullets and the communication that they sent. We have a full board meeting next week.
Right. Yeah.
Is it too late to we could just put it under new business to just have Sebastian address the board with the status?
Yeah, or you could just do it verbally with some bullet points if you want. Just say, hey, I just want to give you an update on the portfolio. It's not, as we all know, reading in the press, and then just go through, like what he thinks we should say to the board, just to say, hey, we're on top of it and we're looking at it, and there's not much we can do. We ride through the storms, but this is the way we're allocated, just in case it came up for you.
Right.
I'll reach out to him today.
It hasn't been posted yet, so I can certainly add it to the agenda.
All right, thank you. I had that as a note somewhere else to bring it up. All right, so no public comment. Next meeting scheduled for April 10th. at 8:30, but I would expect another meeting for these audit interviews to be scheduled. So stay tuned for that. And with that, we adjourn. If there's no. All right. Thank you all. Great meeting. Very busy.
Good meeting.
Great week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you. See you next week, everyone.